Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. We have yet another fantastic interview, guys. This is one that I recorded a couple weeks ago. We do already have another recorded as well, so we've got one coming in 2 more weeks as well. Been loving these interviews, you guys. And this is Anaya Fisher. She mainly sells on Whatnot Lives, but she didn't start out that way. And she has an incredible story, you guys. I am super excited to share with you her journey and how she got to where she is. So do enjoy with me. We'll see you in a minute.
Thank you.
How are you, my dear?
Good. How are you?
You must be so incredibly busy.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my
I just did
goodness.
scrub today. It was a busy one.
Okay, let's first off, because there's a lot of people who don't know who you are. Why don't you take a second and introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
My name is Anaya. I've been a full-time reseller on and off for about 3 years now. I started off thrifting and retail arbitraging, and I slowly worked my way into doing more volume sales and being more of a supplier for other people.
Wow. Now tell us, you started out, you said 3 years ago. I know you haven't been on Whatnot for 3 years. So tell us from scratch, what intrigued you to start reselling and how did you first literally get started? What created the whole idea?
I started reselling because I did not know how else to make money. My daughter and I were in a rough spot about 3 years ago, and we had nothing. We were starting over from scratch. And so reselling for me was a way to turn money over really quickly and snowball it as fast as possible into, like, instead of working at a job where maybe I made 8 or 10 dollars an hour or something, I could flip a few things every day, and maybe I only made $5 per thing, but it felt like the money was coming in faster than it was when I did like an hourly job. And so
Yeah.
I started thrifting. In the beginning, I didn't know anything about clothes. So I did a lot of kitchen appliances, Roombas, Fitbits, that kind of thing. And clothing has been a hands-on experience, like learning all of it from scratch. When I thrifted, I had to like comp everything I touched because I didn't know like if Old Navy was a good brand. I didn't know if like Vera Wang was a good brand, anything like that.
Yeah. Now, are you originally from America?
I'm Canadian. Yeah.
You are Canadian. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So you live here. When did you move from Canada?
We moved to Seattle when I think I was 3, and we were in Seattle until I was 8, and then we came over to Ohio.
Okay. So you've been raised mainly in America then, in
Yeah.
the United States. Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm
Wow.
still a Canadian citizen though. I don't have like I haven't been naturalized. I think that's what it's called.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Wow. So you started out very similar to a lot of resellers who sell clothing, literally just trying to figure things out. Very green, figuring out brands, making mistakes. Did this sell? Comping things out, which is literally how so many of us start out, is literally just in hopes.
Yep. Just by doing. You learn by doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you literally learn by doing. Now, how often did you like buy something and were all the items that you first started out when it was just you and your daughter, the items that you bought at the thrift store, did they all sell running the comps or did you make mistakes and okay, this didn't sell. If it didn't sell, what did you do with it?
So when I was doing the hard goods, I didn't care if I made $5 at all or if I got full market price. I didn't know how to comp stuff when I was doing like the kitchen appliances and the Fitbits and stuff. So I would just list it for like $5 or $10 more than what I paid. And if it sold, that was good. If it didn't sell for $5 more, like within a day, I would just cut price down to break even just to get it to move. Like I
Yeah.
had nowhere to store inventory. When I started selling clothing, a lot of stuff sat for a lot longer. And then I had to learn how to run comps and how to look at sold prices and everything. And I didn't know how to get rid of stuff that didn't sell. Like I probably still have stuff from like 2 years ago sitting in my storage unit that hasn't sold yet just because you never really have it all figured out, right? Like you're
Right.
always learning what
Seriously.
sells and everything like that.
Well,
So
and reselling is changing so much. Even the last year, reselling has changed majorly.
yeah.
Um, I mean, granted, it changed during shutdowns and all that. Honestly, I don't really consider that a factor at this point because the only thing I think that has really still affected reselling from all that 3 years ago is pricing. The cost of goods has seriously changed.
Hmm.
And people now are looking even more so for a good deal because of all that happened 3 years ago than they were before. But now, when you first started, what platforms did you start on? You said you started with hard goods. Where were you selling that? And did you switch from that when you did the clothes? Did you change platforms? How did you start out? Were you on eBay or Poshmark? How did all that start?
Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. Those were the only places I could sell because I didn't know how to ship because I didn't have a computer or printer or anything. So it was just,
Wow.
yeah. So it was
You
all
were
Facebook.
really, really raw. I mean, this was like really different for you compared to a lot of resellers.
Yeah. I think it was probably 4 months before I shipped anything. I think I got like a whole bunch of bulk purses off eBay and then I flipped them back onto eBay. So I just got like 120 pounds of purses, broke it down into individual purses, and then listed it back on eBay and sold them there. And that was when I started learning how to do Mercari and stuff. Like I think my first 4 transactions on Mercari are all cancellations. Like if you scroll back to the very beginning, because I didn't know what I was doing. So I would just like sell stuff and then it would sell somewhere else and I would just cancel on Mercari because I didn't understand that it was like a lasting ding on there.
Yeah.
And then it was probably like 6 months before I understood Poshmark and that you had to share stuff. Like I didn't understand that you had to share your closet, so I didn't. And then stuff never sold on there. So I was like, well, this is a stupid platform. Stuff doesn't sell on here.
This is going to be such a great interview. I'm so glad that you're in. Thank you so much for doing this because everybody has such a different story. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do these interviews on my YouTube channel because everybody has such a different story. And everybody's story motivates somebody, encourages somebody.
Oh yeah.
Your start is a little bit different than somebody else's because you didn't know about Poshmark. You started out on Craigslist, which most people don't. So learning all of this, you said you didn't have a laptop to start with. It was just you and your daughter. So tell us your progression of learning. Your step by step. You just started out. You don't have a computer. You're sourcing. You've sold a few things after a few months. You're still learning the platforms. How did you make a living while you were doing all that? Did you have a job or literally were you staying with family and you were just learning as you went? Tell us kind of your green start.
So I started reselling because my daughter and I left my ex and we had no money, we had no car, we had no home. So I started reselling as just like a way to eat and to get an apartment and everything. So I borrowed a car from someone and while I was reselling, I was also doing Instacart. And then after about a month, I got a job working at the UPS warehouse. And so I was working 3 jobs basically. I was UPS warehouse, Instacart, and reselling all at the same time, just like trying to survive.
Wow.
Yeah, I think after 6 weeks, I was able to buy a car. It was a $1,500 2004 Chevy Impala. It was an absolute garbage mobile, but
It
it
was
allowed me to
something. It
live
was
around.
something.
Yep,
Yeah.
it moved and it allowed me to get to the things that actually made me money, so I could like level up and that kind of thing. And then it was 4 months until we were able to get an apartment. And then a year ago, I bought a house. So it's just
This
been
is
a long journey.
incredible. I mean, seriously, Anaya, do I say Anaya? What do you want people to call you? I see Anaya here, but what do people typically call you?
Anaya is fine.
Anaya,
Anaya,
okay.
anything like that. Yeah, I respond to anything.
It's incredible to me, your story, to just hearing you for 5 minutes. You have so many people who have access to everything. They have access. There are a lot of people, when they first start out, they have access to Mercari, Poshmark. They understand how platforms work. Granted, there is a learning curve, but honestly, for majority of resellers, the learning curve isn't the platforms. It's learning what sells. That's the biggest factor. And understanding when you buy something, how long it might take. Is this a good brand? Does this sell for me? Living in different places too kind of determines what sells what. But for you, it was even more of a breakdown learning the curve. I
Yeah,
mean, and you didn't have a car, so you had to find a way to get to the thrift stores because it's easy to make excuses. It is
right.
so easy to make excuses, and you have literally thrown all of those excuses out the door, girlfriend. Seriously. This is so amazing. In first 5 minutes, girl, I am seriously in awe of where you came from. This is
Thank you.
incredible. So many people need to know that it doesn't matter where you're starting, you can be a reseller. And
That's the
you just
beautiful
proved
thing
that.
about reselling. Like anyone can do it no matter where you're at in life or where you're starting from. It's the kind of thing that's accessible to anyone.
It really is. So you didn't have a car. How did you get to the thrift store?
I borrowed a car
You
from
borrowed a
someone.
car.
Yeah. So I would drop my daughter off at daycare in the morning. She went to an in-home daycare. It was $175 a week. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most expensive thing in the world. But I'd drop her off at daycare. I would go to UPS and I'd print my labels because I didn't have a printer. So I'd print my labels for
Wow.
eBay or whatever sold. I'd go to the post office. I would use their free packing supplies to pack everything, or I'd like pull stuff out of the dumpster behind the store to pack things. And then the thrift store was right beside the post office. So I'd go to the thrift store for about 15 minutes. I would normally focus on jeans, dresses, and shoes because I only had 15 minutes. I would find whatever I could, throw it in the trunk for the day, and go to the UPS warehouse, do an 8-hour shift, go pick up my daughter, get her to bed, have some dinner or something, and then list everything I found that day and pull anything that sold that day out of storage, like out of my closet or whatever I have.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is just amazing. I mean, I'm humbled. Seriously, I'm humbled. I'm not saying that. I hope you don't mean. I hope when I come across saying that I mean this genuinely with some big heart, because it's not to say negatively towards other resellers, but so many people have so much drama about reselling, especially on Instagram. I don't know how long you've been on Instagram, but there's so much drama about the stupidest things on Instagram. When I listen to you, it's about facts, how to get it done, and if you don't know how to do it, you figure out how to do it and you make it happen.
Yeah.
Seriously.
If
I
you
wish
like
so
it,
many
you make
more
it happen. If
resellers
you like
had
it.
get the facts, figure out how to do it, and make it happen. If it didn't work, how can I make it work? Taking the drama out of it and just kick button. You know what I'm saying? I
It's not
love
personal,
this.
it's business.
Seriously. I just, oh my gosh, you make me so happy because you take the drama out of it. You look at it as like, okay, I have to make something happen. So now that you're at thrift stores, you've kind of got an idea of what's selling. What was working for you brand-wise when you first started?
American Eagle. So this was back when Facebook Marketplace wasn't whatever it is now, but it was back in the days of when you could like list stuff and it would just sell on Facebook Marketplace. So I did really well with like BKE jeans, Torrid, American Eagle jeans or sweaters. Lane Bryant was still a pretty solid like $15 or so back then. Just bread and butter. I didn't know Gucci from a hole in the wall. I had to like stick with the bread and butter brands, the stuff I saw other people wearing, because that was all I knew about.
Yeah, yeah.
And so other brands were a learning curve. Like I didn't know what Revolve was. What is an Anthropologie? I don't know these places.
And honestly, I have found that honestly the big brands like Anthropology and Revolve and things like that weren't really becoming really pronounced until Whatnot came on board. And now
Yeah,
that everybody's doing Whatnot, Anthropology Revolve has just blown up because everybody's trying to find the big brands to sell on Whatnot. But
yeah.
even, I mean, I'm sure that they were on Poshmark, eBay, and Mercari before, but I think until Whatnot kind of came more about within the last year and a half, I don't think people paid that much attention to those brands. But now that it's on Whatnot, everybody's trying to sell it on all the other platforms.
Right. It's brand exposure, right? So I think with Whatnot, there are a lot of brands people never knew about before that are
Yes.
becoming a lot more relevant now, especially because you can get palettes from these places and there will be all the different brands inside it. And so
Yeah.
it's a lot easier for everyone to get access to or even hear of
Yeah.
these brands we never knew before.
But I think there's a catch-22 though, because like you were just talking about brands right now that people aren't looking for, but they're still great, solid, what I consider mall brands that people are still looking for, but people are so focused on revolving Anthropology, they're not looking for these solid mall brands. And if
Yeah.
your COG is super low, those brands are still really great sellers. You know what I'm saying?
When I would get pallets of like the Lost Cargo stuff, I would get more excited by an Old Navy denim jacket than I would about Gymshark because I know for a fact that Old Navy denim jacket will sell within a day for $25 every single time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I so agree. I did another interview with a gal last week and I said, I'm kind of curious to see if in the next year, because the higher end brands becoming so saturated on other platforms and everybody's trying to sell it on Whatnot, if the mall brands might make their circular coming back and people might start look for those. Because even like on YouTube videos, I am hearing other people saying that like Lane Bryant's coming back, Torrid's coming back, American Eagle is coming back. People are starting to look for those, not on Whatnot, but on the regular platforms. And not everybody sells on Whatnot on Lives. But now let's get back to when you first started. You were looking for those particular brands. Was that your main focus, or did you kind of expand out in brands?
If I came across a weird brand, I would look it up. I would Google it or look up comps or something like that just to learn about it. But I wasn't actively seeking out weird brands. Like there was no online sourcing or anything like that to look for specifically like Poupette St. Barth or Kate Spade or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, I just had the thrift store and my local thrift stores. And that was all I could source from. So those brands that I was looking for, like the American Eagle and Torrid and stuff, that's what was easily available to me in those thrift stores.
Right. So you started making sales, you said, after about 4 months. At what point did you like really build up an inventory? Like how much inventory did you build up to while you were selling on Facebook?
Not much. I never held stuff for longer than 2 days when I was selling locally. It was only once I started listing stuff on Poshmark and eBay and stuff that I actually was like holding inventory. But when I was doing the hard goods, I made a point of never holding anything for longer than 2 days. Because
Wow.
it's bulk, right? You know, like
Right.
a Roomba or a little toaster oven is a lot bigger than a pair of jeans.
Right. So how long did it take you to transition onto Macari and Poshmark and such?
A couple months. It took a few months. Yeah.
Okay.
And when I started like being a little bit more comfortable with the clothing market and looking for brands and sizes and styles and stuff like that, that was when I moved away from the hard goods and fully into clothing.
Yeah. I know a lot of people like hard goods. My husband, he used to resell with me, but now he's working full-time job and going to school and stuff. But a lot of people love hard goods. For me, I don't like the packaging. Clothing
Same.
is so simple. It's just you package it and it goes.
Yeah. I've been doing makeup the last few days and that's like too much packaging for me, just putting it in like bubble wrap and a mailer, you know. The
Yeah,
clothing is easy. You just turf
yeah,
it into a mailer and it's done.
yeah. So how long were you selling on Poshmark? And now you were on Poshmark. What were the platforms you were selling on besides Poshmark?
eBay and Mercari and still Facebook Marketplace, but I stopped doing local pickup and I would only do shipping on there. I
Well,
think
how
it was
did you cross post?
just by hand, like copy pasting everything and
Oh my
re-uploading.
goodness, so you weren't using a cross posting platform either.
Nope.
And how long ago was this?
2.5 years ago, 2.5 to 3 years ago.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
I don't
You
think
you humble me so much by how hard you work to get where you are.
I don't think I had a cross poster until like a year in. I don't think I
Wow.
yeah.
And you were still going and doing labels at UPS now. How long was it were you able to actually like get a label maker and start doing things like affording the essentials of shipping?
I've had a label maker for 2 years now. So I didn't have one for about a year
About a
at
year.
least.
So you were not only like, trying to get a car, going to thrift stores with a borrowed card, going to UPS, getting your labels, your daughter, doing this full time, then packaging. You had a crazy life the first year.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was everything all at once, just trying to figure out a lot of different things and make it all happen.
And it's funny because when I'm on your lives, people talk about how you'll do a live show for 3 or 4 hours, ship for 3 or 4 hours, and do another live show, and everybody on that live is saying, "Oh my gosh, how do you do it?" That is
This
probably
is
so
what I
much
did
easier
before.
for you now than your first year. So you're
Yep.
thinking this is a piece of cake at this point.
Compared to before, yeah.
Yeah,
Still
yeah.
trying to find a way to make it better than it is now, but it's getting there.
And a lot of people don't know about your first year.
No, no, because I don't ever want anyone to feel like they have to pity me or something because of anything like that.
Right. To
You
me, I
know,
hope you understand. For me, it's not pitying you. I'm humbled. Like I said, you are taking so many excuses out of the equation, seriously. And there's so many people who come up with, it's easy even for me sometimes to come up with excuses
oh yeah,
when
it's
it's
easy.
easier, you
Yeah,
know?
I can make
Okay,
excuses for what I
so
don't do most.
you've been reselling for a year. You've been cross-posting on your own without a cross-posting platform. Did you ever bring a cross-posting platform into the mix?
I'm probably about a year in. I tried List Perfectly and Vendu at the same time. I got trials of both. I didn't like Vendu. I still don't like Vendu. I tried List Perfectly though. I ran into some issues with it cross-posting over to eBay. It would just drop my pictures. It wouldn't take them over. And
Yeah.
so I started using Prime Lister instead,
Yeah.
which is
I
basically
actually,
the same as List
yeah.
Perfectly.
I had that issue. In fact, I didn't actually start cross posting until about 2 years ago. I've only been in it for, it'll be 3 years this summer. Um, but I tried List Perfectly as well. I'm actually on Vindu now, but I think Vindu's changed a lot since you tried it 2 years ago. And I absolutely love Vindu. It's working really well for me. I don't like List Perfectly. And that's the thing about these different user-friendly, whatever works. I think people should not worry about what somebody else is using if it works for them. You should focus on if it's working for you, run with it. You know,
Absolutely.
if lives work for you, run with it. If doing lives and listing works for you, run with it. And that's another thing about Instagram drama is people gripe and complain about how, oh, well, people are doing lives or people are doing this, people are doing that. And I'm like, get over it. If you're making money for your family and it works for you, who cares what other people are doing, right? Obviously, lives are working well for you. Okay, so you were cross-posting. You were using this perfectly. So you were doing clothes. Did you build up your inventory over time?
Yeah, I think, when was it? It was probably like after I'd been full-time for about 6 months. I had about 900 active listings.
Okay,
It took a
okay.
little while.
And would you say they were coming in and going out within a few months, or were you holding on to things? Were you finding that they sold quickly?
I think things sold more quickly back then than they do now. So yeah, I don't think I ever really held on to anything for longer than maybe like 4 to 6 months back then.
Nice. Of course, back then, I think reselling was quicker for some people. Reselling has become more of a thing for people to do in the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. I know for me, like I said, I started probably after you did, and a lot more people are trying to resell. But I don't think everybody is a full-time reseller. A lot of people still work jobs and just kind of piddle with it too. So there's various different types of reselling for a lot of different people. But you were definitely, this is like full-time, you were doing this to make a living. Now, at what point were you actually living on reselling for you and your daughter?
After, when was it? It was probably April 2021, I think.
Now, this was in the midst of all the shutdowns and stuff. How did you manage with all that stuff going on?
I don't know. I think it made it easier because there were less people out in the stores and everything. There were a lot of people, like a lot of thrift stores were shut down. There just weren't many people out in general. I think I had less competition in thrift stores then than I would now if I tried it again.
Yeah. Did you actually have thrift stores in the area shut down where you couldn't source?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
did you just revert to online sourcing?
Yeah, that was when I went back to eBay and I would just like find things on eBay. And I brought in a lot less stuff. It got difficult, which was also part of the reason why I moved out of thrifting and went to like new with tags boxes and that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, so you've been that when at what point was it that you transitioned to whatnot?
A year ago, I think November 2022, a little over.
So when things reopened, were you still doing new with tags boxes, or did you kind of mix that with sourcing again? How did you transition when things opened up?
I just quit thrifting because the ROI and the money I could make was better off of new with tags boxes. It was like I maxed out on what I could make with thrifting. Like I only have so much time to list so many things. I can only source so many things. And therefore that puts a cap on how much money I can make, which
Right.
was about $1,400 a week. When I moved to new with tags boxes, I'm spending more per item, but I'm recouping more. Like I'm making a higher profit per. So even if I can still only list like 100 items a week, I'm making more money on those 100 items. So maybe my limit isn't $1,400 a month or a week anymore. Maybe it's more like 2,000, something like that. So
Right.
I just never really went back to thrifting because it didn't make sense for the time.
Right.
Plus, also with thrifting, you have to like go in person as well, and that takes time. With
Takes
like
time to
online,
travel, gas, expenditures of getting to and from versus online, clicking and researching, clicking. Yep.
yeah,
Oh
it
yeah,
comes.
definitely.
You
Yeah.
pay for a premium service, but it makes more sense for me to do it that way.
Yeah. May I ask when you were doing online sourcing you with tags, what was your average cog back then?
For bulk boxes or for the eBay kind of sourcing.
Anything.
For eBay, I would try to focus on higher end things. So my cost of goods was probably like $50, but my sales price was closer to 150. For bulk boxes, it was probably 15 to 20 range, and it was maybe $45 average sale price, so I was maybe doubling, but I was doing heavier volume than I was off of the eBay stuff.
Right. Wow. So you even knew with tags, your starting cog was actually quite a bit higher than
Yeah.
a lot of sourcing now.
Because back then, like my options were bulk, which I think is still probably like a $28 to $40 cost of good. And then Jomar, which was so much heavy salvage that it pushed the cost of goods way up. And then Dervy, which was also so much heavy salvage. It was maybe like they charged you $6 a piece or something, but after removing all the damage and unsellable stuff, the cost of goods was close to 20.
So you were buying boxes. It sounded like you're kind of doing something that another gal that I follow does. She buys pallets of a certain brand from Helpsy Source, and she'll get like 400 pieces, but she'll sell maybe 20 or 50 of those pieces at 50 plus. She'll pick out all the good stuff and then, either take it to buy, sell, trade or something like that. But she does like dresses and the nice, tops and bottoms and things like that, and everything else she just flushes out. Is that kind of what you were doing? Is just looking for the good pieces and fleshing it out?
No, I would list anything possible. It was just anything I couldn't list was so damaged.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, so you transitioned, you were reselling on the different platforms for a couple of years, right? And then, now what triggered Whatnot? How did that come about for you? Did a friend tell you? Did you hear about it online or on a video or how?
One of my friends, my best friend, she was one of the first like early sellers in the women's contemporary category. And she was moving so much inventory. And I was so jealous because I was like, well, you're moving like 100 something items a day. And here I am surrounded by my piles of crap that aren't selling, like, so I wanted to do that like her. I was able to bring in a lot more inventory. And of course, like I'm a reseller, I have that itch to like always source and spend more and buy more stuff and have all the pretty things in the world. But I wasn't selling enough stuff to justify the kind of spending level I wanted. So for me, Whatnot was a way to like move a bunch of stuff that hadn't been selling and wasn't selling, and then just move out crap from ballots I was bringing in that I didn't really care to like list. So maybe I could like have access to a lower brand and it wasn't going to be worth my time to list it. But if I could blow it out in a few shows and make a couple dollars profit here or there, it was still a bit of profit off a pallet. Back then I was still listing and selling stuff too. So I would also kind of cherry pick through the pallets a little bit. Like if I got a pallet of Good American, I would have picked through it for the clothes or the coats, the jeans, the heavier items, that kind of thing. I would have listed those on Poshmark and eBay and stuff. And then like the shorts, the tank tops, the bodysuits, anything like that, I would put on Whatnot. And I would just get rid of them at any price possible because to me, those weren't worth listing and selling for like maybe a $5 profit.
Right. So now when you started out on Whatnot, did you start out doing just like dollar starts or did you start out at a higher price bracket?
Both. So I had a backlog of Nordstrom house brands that I'd just gotten in pallets and I didn't care what happened to them. It was either run it in a Whatnot show at $1 start or donate it and take nothing for it. So those I used as like fodder for my first early Whatnot shows, just figuring it out and building an audience. And then after that, there was a place here I would locally shop from and I got all of the free people returns. So my cost of goods was $15 to $40. I would start those at my break-even price. Like there was no way in heck I was starting those at $1. So I'd start those at break-even. And then at least if I broke even, I could go back and buy more. But sometimes I would make money, sometimes I didn't. But yeah, absolutely never dollar starts on those.
Yeah. So when you started out on Whatnot, were you still listing to help kind of recoup and bring money in and then you built up Whatnot?
Yeah, I never intended on Whatnot being a full-time gig for me. I thought I would be a listing and selling person forever. And then Whatnot just like slowly took over until it's my main source now. I also had a full-time job from January to July of last year. So I couldn't list stuff, work a full-time job, and do Whatnot. So I let the listing stuff go because I was making the least off that and it was giving me the least out of all of those three things. I was getting the most out of Whatnot, the full-time job. So those were the two things that I thought I could manage at the time and I could focus like more, like closer to 100% of my attention on.
Wow. You know, you got your own place eventually. You're living on your own. You're doing these. You're still listing. You started Whatnot a year ago. You're still listing. You're bringing in boxes from online sourcing. How did you learn the process of all this? Was it just literally by mistake and figuring things out? Like when you were sourcing online boxes, how did you find those boxes? Did you like buy a box and this one didn't work? Or, and then you bought a different box and that one worked? Did each box work okay? How did that pan out when you first started out on those?
It was just experimenting. I would just
Yeah.
Google like, liquidation companies or wholesale clothing or anything like that. I would buy one box from this place. If I made money off it, I'd probably get a second one. If I didn't, or the items were just garbage or they weren't as described, or it was just really low end when they said like items could include or brands could include this really high end stuff, I would never buy from them again. Like they immediately got blacklisted. I wouldn't touch that again. So it was a lot of experimentation and just slowly rotating through stuff. I never stuck with any of those online sourcing companies. Like right now, I don't source off anywhere that appears on Google, and I never would again. But that was what I had access to back then.
Yeah. Well, and
Things
I
have
know
changed.
from watching your shows, you've built up, some people have reached out to you, said, hey, can you sell my items? And I know you've shared that you can't share those businesses, so we won't go down that path. We want to protect that.
It, so I don't buy from a company. I don't buy from a single company. I buy direct from the brands themselves, going through a
Okay.
middleman. So
Okay.
it's never anything that appears on Google. It's relationship based, right? So these
Yeah.
people reached out to me because they thought I fit in their small circle of maybe like 5 clients that they have. And they have these 5 clients because we're already always ready to buy. We move very heavy volume. We make stuff disappear. Like we don't list stuff anywhere online. We don't have websites. You're never going to find what we do with this stuff unless you're actively watching my Whatnot show and you see me running it.
Right.
And we have the ability to spend like $100,000 plus at a time. So
Right.
for those reasons, the people reached out to me.
So now you have, between where you are now, which is massive, and you've been blessed from hard work, from gaining those relationships. But when you first started out on Whatnot to this incredible spot that you're in now, there's a pretty big gap. So you were buying, boxes online. You started things at $1, kind of flushed some of the stuff out that wasn't selling, and then you were buying boxes. When did you get to the point where you kind of knew, before these relationships started that you have now? You started out on Whatnot a year ago, so over time you've built up gradually. Were you buying boxes from some of these companies that other people are buying from, pallets? Were you buying pallets like that? Because you eventually moved over to pallets. When did the
I
transition
got
from
my
boxes?
first pallet. I got my first pallet in March 2022, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And when I started on Whatnot, I was buying from some of the same people I do now. So it's just been, let me think. My first pallet would have been Lost Cargo. It was UPS Lost Freight. That company doesn't sell anymore. I think they finished doing that in August 2022, I think. And then there was Nordstrom pallets. Nordstrom stopped liquidating directly in September 2021. So I had to like recoup and regroup and like find somewhere new to buy off of. I'd been dabbling with the same people that I buy from now for a little while. It was when all of these other options vanished that I really turned to these people and was like, okay, you're going to be supplying me a lot more. Let's see what you have. And so we've kind of grown together. Like I've been a lot of people's first clients since like day one that they started their businesses. So it's a lot of, it's symbiotic, or yeah, I think that's the
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
We benefit from it.
Right. So when you first started out, you were doing pallets. Like, how many on average would you sell on a show when you first started out with the pallets? Was it slow starting, or did you build up a pretty good community by then, where every show was just boom, 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 we're selling 100 pieces at one time? Did it slowly build up?
No, I think it kind of started fast from the get-go. I think my first show, I sold like 60 items. The second show was horrible. My second show was catastrophic. I might have sold like 5 things. But then after that, it just kind of like stayed right around like 60 pieces minimum per show. It might have been my fifth show. I sold 200 items, but
Was
it's
this the
all
$1 starts, trying to flush that stuff out that wasn't working?
a little bit of both. So it would have been
Okay.
dollars on like the Nordstrom house brands or the Free People, starting it at break even.
Yeah. So doing that obviously built up a great community for you. People love dollar starts. Just,
Right,
just be honest,
right.
people love dollar starts. And I've talked with a lot of people who sell on Whatnot, and some people can't do $1 starts because if it sells at a dollar and they're losing money, there's quite a few people who I have connected with on Whatnot. They do say that if you are okay with losing money on a dollar start, because it is entirely possible it's going to sell at a dollar. And if it sells at a dollar, you have to be okay with the potential loss on that piece. And a lot of people who are resellers, their cog is not just a dollar unless they've gone to the bins. And even at the bins, it's still probably at least a dollar, $1.50. So even if it sells a dollar, they're losing a little bit of money. You were in a fortunate situation where some of the stuff, it was either just going to get flushed out and donated anyway, so you were okay with making 40 cents on 200 pieces in several shows and getting rid of stuff. So that was a blessing in disguise for you and building up community. That's amazing.
Yeah, I tried to do that on purpose. Like there was no way I would go back and try to do it again using my good inventory at dollar starts.
Yeah.
Like it
You would
was,
have
I
had to
was not
start
one of
out at least the cog, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So if somebody's trying to start out on Whatnot and they have that situation where they've bought cog that's $15, but it's a really good brand like Free People or Revolve or Anthropology or something of that nature, Lululemon, how would you recommend they start their shows out when they're charging $15? Because so many people are expecting the $1 or $5 starts. You have a lot of people on here who are trying to get started and they have to charge $15. What would you recommend? Would you recommend they switch to maybe flushing out inventory? How would you recommend somebody starting out on Whatnot? Because there's a lot of sellers on Whatnot now. It's gotten pretty vast, even from a year ago. I know for me, I started out on Whatnot almost, it was a year ago, not this last summer, a year ago, okay? I have had to fumble my way on Whatnot. It's been quite a journey for me. I've left it a couple times because it just wasn't working.
Yep, same.
Last week I started men's pieces and I've sold almost 20 pieces in 1 week. Outside of kids clothes, that is the best I have ever done on Whatnot in a year. I have finally found my niche. It's taken me a year, but I didn't want to give up.
Yep.
Didn't want to give up. So for those people who are like, ah, I'm pulling my hair out, tell me for our first person what you'd recommend for them.
If your inventory is good, people are going to pay your asking price for it. So I didn't do well on Whatnot. I didn't have any sort of like return customers. I didn't feel like it was going well until I started doing the Free People stuff, and I was starting it higher. But I was the only person running that stuff. So it was they buy from me or they don't get the stuff.
Yeah.
So that helped me like that helped a lot, I think, with getting that kind of audience and that kind of buyer base who is willing to pay like the higher prices on stuff. If you have good inventory, people will pay for it, right? Like you can go in the luck shows on Whatnot and people drop thousands of dollars on one bag because they have to, because there's nowhere else they're going to be able to get it.
Yeah.
And even like $15 or something on, let's say, like Madewell jeans or Lululemon, that's still a deal.
Yeah.
You know, people still want it.
So it's a matter of affording the upfront cost of the inventory. Say it's $15 a piece and you have 100 pieces. It's a matter of affording the inventory for each of those pieces up front. If there's somebody who doesn't have that kind of budget, but they want to get started on Whatnot, say that maybe they have to start at the thrift store, how would you recommend they go about that? Or would you recommend maybe they start on some different platforms, build up some finances? What would you recommend for them? Because I know there's a lot of people wondering this.
Right. It depends on what kind of inventory you have access to in your thrift stores. Like if you're in Florida or California or New York, you have access to a lot better inventory than like me in Ohio or someone in Wyoming, you know, someone in the middle of nowhere, a really rural area. For some people, if you live rural enough, your only option is going to be online sourcing.
Which is me.
Yeah, it just depends on where you are and what your access is. Like start with where you are, build out from there.
Yeah.
Don't take a business loan though. Like absolutely don't take a business loan
Oh
to
my
be able
goodness, because I live minimum 45 minutes from our closest thrift store. And I live in South Dakota. So Sioux Falls is a pretty big territory, but when you live in South Dakota and your surrounding areas or small towns like mine, I mean, I can walk to the post office and be there in 5 minutes. That's how small it is. There are no stop lights in my town. So
Really?
yeah, there's stop signs, but there are literally no stoplights until you get to the next town. Yeah.
Wow.
It's actually really nice. Everybody around here is like You can walk down the street, run into a complete stranger, and people will say hi to you. People are just really cool. But if your closest, is thrift store is 45 minutes away, but when you live in towns like the surrounding areas like here, you're not typically going to find Lululemon, Johnny Was. You don't find Free People. You certainly don't find Revolver Anthropology. Um, so, like you said, online is the best option for a lot of people like myself. So, yeah, that's why I'm saying reselling is so different for so many different people. And then there are some people who live in Portland where you can find those brands, but they're charging $15-20 a piece at the thrift store for those items.
Right.
It's pretty crazy. So we were talking about like cogs. Um, would you recommend to somebody if they want to start out on whatnot, maybe starting out on the platforms first? Oh, I know one thing I was kind of getting at with the cog is you mentioned a business loan. My husband and I are debt-free people. We started, my business has been debt-free. Everything that I've done from scratch is debt-free. I have not put one thing on credit card, loan, or anything like that to build my business to where it is. I would highly encourage anybody to be that way. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Well, business loans are predatory in themselves. I think they're
Yeah,
predatory. They're built kind of the same
absolutely.
way as these payday loans, you know? Like it's going to be 25% interest. You have to pay it back in 6 months. Like if you're listing online, you're not going to sell all that stuff in 6 months. You're not going to be able to recoup the money back, most likely, to be able to pay it back in 6 months. I don't think they work.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to start with like whatever money you have available and disposable right now. Go to the thrift store. If you have $5, spend $5. Sell that stuff. Take the $5 plus whatever profit, go back and buy more and just like rinse and repeat until you're at a level to where you can like buy the higher dollar stuff and buy the bigger boxes.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I agree with you 100%. It's. I was listening to Common Cloth
Oh, I
on
love
a chat this morning, and it's just it freaks me out and scares me. How many of these people who are reselling are putting these pallets on credit cards and hoping for the best?
Yeah, because I always say like don't spend the money on inventory if you could not survive without that money. Like if you couldn't burn that money and never see it again, don't spend it because there's no guarantee you'll ever see a pallet. There's no guarantee you'll get actually good inventory in good sellable condition. Like just be prepared to lose the money. And if you would go homeless by buying that pallet or burning the money, then don't do it.
Yeah,
Buy something smaller that you could
yeah.
afford.
And I know some people who are reselling on whatnot and do that, and it works really well for them. And I don't want, like I said, I don't want to ever be negative about another reseller and what they're doing. If it works for them and their credit cards work for them, that's great. My husband and I have always 100% agreed that is not for us in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
We have paid cash for everything, and we continue to do so, and will continue to do so. You are not the only person that I've heard that said, I thank you for saying that. Like when you're starting out, it's okay to start out small. If you don't get on whatnot right away, would you say for somebody that that is okay?
Yeah, of course. Like
Yeah,
start with whatever you can afford and what you're comfortable with and what inventory you have access to. You can always start later, right?
yeah,
It's a work in progress and you can
yeah.
always try later.
Most 100%. I'm so glad to hear you say that because some resellers will say, "Oh, just get a credit card, put it on the credit card, and pay it off at the end of the month." My husband and I don't agree with that philosophy. Again, if people do, that's definitely their business model. I
Yeah.
don't again want to be negative towards business model, but that my husband and I are like, no,
Yeah.
I
It's not
can't even imagine.
so it
And
depends on yeah. If you're just thrifting, like a $50 thrift store buy is different than these pallet buys. That could be like $50,000, right? It's a matter of scale too and how much you are willing to go into debt for.
when you first started buying pallets, give us an idea. Now, this was a couple years ago when you first started buying pallets, right?
Hmm.
Okay. What was the average from the pallet, purchase the pallet to the shipping cost? Because most people, they think about a pallet, but a lot of people think shipping is included in the pallet, and it isn't.
No.
Share with us what the average cost of goods was for a pallet and typically what shipping cost is on a pallet.
I probably paid about $2,000 for each lost cargo pallet back then. Shipping was probably about $800 extra. I ship a lot of pallets now. Like the pallets I ship out in wholesale to people range from $400 to over $1,000 for a single pallet in shipping. And that's just shipping. Like that increases your cost of goods anywhere from $1 to $3 extra.
Exactly. And that's key right there too. People, I think when people first start out in reselling, to incorporate any, like if even if you're purchasing online, you pay extra like $40 for a box of shipping. You order it online and they tack on $40 for shipping. I have always incorporated shipping costs in my cog. And I think
And
some
shipping
resellers
supplies and
forget
like
to
your poly
incorporate
mailers and bubble
any
mailers.
shipping, whether it's a pallet or a box, into their cog and make sure they're covering the cost of the shipping into the cog.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all like part of it's an expense. It's an expense that you paid to get the item to you. It should be included.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
where else are you going to incorporate it on your like profit and loss or come tax time? How are you accounting for that shipping cost?
So now I know a lot of people have asked this jokingly on your shows. Do you ever sleep?
I do. I'm an old lady. I'm probably in bed by like 9 o'clock every night, up at 5.
Oh
I
my
love sleep.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow. So when you first started out, was there anybody who was doing reselling that gave you tips, or how did you learn a lot of your information? Did you literally just do everything by yourself, or did you plug into any other resellers? I know a lot of YouTube videos, even 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't as much about reselling on YouTube or anywhere else. Did you find little spots and niches or people to plug into when you started out to get information from?
I just learned by doing. I don't think I watched any YouTube videos until like a year ago. And I didn't know there were even Facebook groups for that kind of stuff until probably like beginning of 2022 or yeah, end of 2021, beginning of 2022, somewhere around there. I've only been in them for a year to a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah, I think reselling is really blowing up a lot on different social media because it's really grown in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, granted, reselling's been around for a while, but I
Mhm.
think it's blown up even more in the last 4 to 5, 6 years. It's become more and more popular. Do you have people you plug into now, or do you still
No,
kind of just stay independent?
I stay independent because the way they run their business isn't going to be applicable to me because everyone has different access to different opportunities, different ways they run their business, different sourcing. I can't compare my business to anyone else's because everyone does it differently.
Yeah. So you don't have anybody that you've watched or seen or anything like that in the past even couple years that you heard something or saw something and you're like, oh my gosh, that made a big difference in your business. It's just been what you've done.
Yeah, I don't think I've tried. I got a new like shipping and storage system recently based off kind of like a compilation of things I saw in Rinzy and Daily Refinement shows, just because I don't like how I organize my stuff during shows right now. And so I was trying to make it better. Um, Other than that, like I'm not gonna source differently or do my accounting anything like that because of like some influencer, because who knows if they were like paid to promote that company, that sourcing company, or the CPA or whatever it is,
Right.
you know?
I think in some ways it's been a blessing disguised for you that you haven't paid attention to a lot of people. It is easy. I know I've kind of gone through this when I started out watching YouTube videos. You see somebody doing something like, oh, I wonder if that might work. You see somebody else starting a group, oh, well, maybe that'll work. Um, when did you start feeling like it was just clicking for you? When you were listing or when you were doing lives, at what point in your reselling did you feel like, wow, okay, this is really starting to make sense. I really feel like I can make a living at this. You were starting to get a piece like I can take care of my daughter and myself. I'm independent. I know what I'm doing. At what point did you feel that way?
Oh, I still don't think I know what I'm doing. That's reselling, right? Um, I think I started feeling like I could sustain us off this probably about 4 months after I started. And that was when I started thinking about quitting my job, like the UPS gig, and just going full-time thrifting. And then about 2 months later, I did. And I've never looked back, except for when I had the full-time job for like 6 or 7 months last year.
Wow. Yeah, I think you definitely have a blessing because I think so many people get caught up in. I know I got caught up in like when I was watching videos. I tried learning by watching videos, and I've mentioned in my YouTube channel don't buy a box because you see somebody bought a box and they got good items in that box, and you go out and you buy that same box. Things get
They're in the
saturated,
clothing store.
and you
No,
don't guarantee that you're going to get the same thing that they got. And so many people, I really had to learn from that. Um, I've learned a lot in the last year. A lot. It's just a lot of mistakes. Um, yeah, I just so now you do. You've mentioned Renzi and Daily Refinement. Do you ever watch Daily Refinement videos?
no.
Really? So you really just work and go, work and go.
Yeah, I like watching Harry Tornado just because of like the thrill of the hunt and because they do stuff so differently from me, and just they're nice people to watch too.
Yeah.
When I was trying to figure out retail arbitrage, I watched a little bit of Lindsay Nicole PM because that's all she does basically is retail arbitrage. So probably like October 2021, I was watching her trying to like figure out how to get into the mindset of it's okay to have a higher cost of good because you will be taking like a much higher sales price and profit on it. And that was something I struggled with going from thrifting to that.
Yeah. Well, and you said that when you started out and you were charging the $15 for free people on whatnot, it worked for you because people were willing to pay that. I think you were fortunate too when you started doing that on whatnot. Whatnot was still trying to find its niche growth for women's category. And like a lot of women who are doing well in the women's category and whatnot now, they kind of jumped on when it first came out, and you were fortunate that that happened. Would you say that that was a blessing for you, that you jumped on it when it kind of first came out?
I think so, just because, like, say back then, maybe there were 10 people running a show in the women's category at any time. It's probably like 30 something, 40 something now. Like, there are so many more people on there. So if you're just starting out, it's hard to stand out in that kind of crowd if no one knows who you are and you've never been on there before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Have you ever thought about doing like a Q&A?
I have, but I think most of the questions would be where do you source? And I'm not trying to like say no and like decline to answer a bunch of questions 40 times in a row.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know a lot of, I know for me, I have had to work really hard this last year to find what works for my business model for sourcing. And if I know that there is availability for other sellers through that source, I'm okay with sharing. But I'm also protective of it because I have to build my business for my family. And I
Mhm.
really respect why some resellers don't want to share because it is a lot of hard work and time in our schedules to do the research to find what works for our business, to find that cog that works, to find the box that works. And so many people don't want to do that research as a reseller. They just want to go onto a show or on a YouTube channel. Hey, tell me where you find your stuff so I can buy it too. Instead
Mhm.
of actually doing the due diligence for their own business model, finding what works for them. But I've also heard a lot of people on YouTube videos say, or even in live say, they don't want to share it because, especially with the palette, like you said, there's so much cost involved in a palette. They don't want another reseller buying a palette from that business, having it be completely bombed palette, and then feel really bad that that person bought from the same company that they did, and that palette that they bought bombed. They've told me that they felt really
Mhm.
bad when they found out, oh, they reached out to the person. I bought from the same company you bought, and this palette is horrible. I can't even sell this stuff. And then they're ragging on the person that they shared where they got the palette from because the palette bombed. They felt
For
really, really
me,
bad that they
more,
shared the information.
for me, it's more deals are take all and only one person gets the deal.
Yeah,
So first off, I'm not allowed to share. Like I will be
right,
sued if I share my supplier's info.
right.
But then if I share the info and get past that part, it's one deal. So then that other person could get it and then I don't get any inventory at all, which starves me out. So if I tell enough people, I'll eventually just get no inventory at all.
Yeah,
My way of sharing is by bringing in the pallet and doing the wholesale I do and charging just over my cost of goods to cover my time. Like you're buying a pallet off me at basically what I paid for it.
yeah.
And that way everyone has access to the inventory I do without starving me out. You
Which
know,
I
I can
think
still,
was so smart of you to do. Really was smart of how you went that direction. You're still making money and blessing other people with inventory that they don't have access to. That was just really smart the way you accommodated that. And I'm
Thanks.
sure a lot
I
of
think
people
it
who can
especially works
afford
well
those
with Whatnot.
palettes appreciated it too.
I think it especially works well with Whatnot because I don't even have to open the pallets to sell them. Like I just run a pallet in a show and I'm like, look, this is McDougal. We're running this pallet today. This one's mine. If you want one, you can have the pallet that's still sealed right behind this one. It'll be very roughly the same in terms of quality and mix. But again, it's not open. So that's your guarantee that I don't skim or sort to take out the good stuff.
Right,
You know,
right.
I
Wow.
think that kind of works really
So
well.
you're doing very well on Whatnot now. I've seen your daughter on the shows too. She's so sweet. Does she
Thank
now
you.
like she could be like, Ma, I'm gonna be a reseller like mommy? What is she? Does she say that?
She says she just wants to eat forever. That's what she wants to do. She's a
How
simple
have you
lady.
thought about expanding in different categories and whatnot outside of women's?
I have. I did makeup the other day. I did my first like beauty show. It
How did
went
that
well.
go?
It went really well. Yeah. I think so. I'm probably going to get like 5,000 pieces of makeup a week. It'll probably be like an ongoing thing.
Nice.
I would like to get into electronics or toys, like kids' toys. I don't want to do kids' clothes. I don't want to do men's clothes.
See, in men's clothes, I love men's clothes. It's working really well for me. I actually sell a lot of men's clothes on my platforms. And men's
Hmm.
clothes is working really well for me and whatnot. I am just so excited I finally found my niche.
That's what I've heard. A lot of people do really well with men's. It doesn't click for me. It doesn't work.
Well, like I said, this last year I've had to get really creative because online sourcing has really, the cog on the different platforms and even in stores has changed so much. And my husband and I have talked intensely about my business, where we want it to go. And we both agree, since we are a cash business, my cog has to stay really low, which means I have to get creative with sourcing. So what I did was I created a listing on Instagram and I reached out to people. If you have a bins close to you and you're willing to source for me, would you please contact me? And I had a gal reach out to me and she's like, yeah, I'll source for you. So we both agreed upon a price that that I paid her for, that included shipping. And my cog is super low and they send me pieces and she's wonderful. If there's a flaw, she credits me the piece and my time on the piece, so I don't have to worry about even if there's a flaw, because errors can happen. So I've had to get really creative with sourcing. And that is one thing. Would you agree that people just have to really get creative? I think people need to stop asking, where do you buy your stuff from? And they have to take the time to do diligence to find out how they need to source for their own business. And I've had to completely change not only what I sell, but how I source, because I used to sell even kids' clothes. I've gotten away from kids' clothes, and just really figure out what niche works for me. And men's is just really working for me. And jewelry. Jewelry
Hmm.
really works for me too. I know, wouldn't it's just crazy. So I'm just really keeping my cog down low. So have you found, outside of the people, are you still going to list on different platforms or just do Whatnot?
I'm still listing. I think I sold 5 things on Poshmark today and 1 thing on eBay. Like
Nice.
it's still slow, right? It's not like the same sales volume I was doing before when I was listing on there full time. But for me, the stuff I list on there is usually more of the stuff I get from like Nordstrom sales or TJ Maxx sales, something like that. It tends to be higher end. It tends to be less saturated. I mean, I get so much stuff in pallets. Like, just think about how much a pallet is. It's like 500 plus items. If I'm listing all of that, that's a ton of stuff to list.
Yeah.
And then it's like all the bulky volume of holding on to that stuff too.
Yeah.
So for pallet stuff, I'd rather just burn volume on Whatnot. But then for the nicer stuff that I hand pick at Nordstrom or TJ Maxx or something like that, I'd rather list it and wait for it to sell because it is worth more. My profit is generally more. I'm okay with hanging on to it.
Yeah. So now you've tried makeup and that did well. You said you were going to do electronics?
I would like to get into electronics or toys or even pet items, something like that.
The shipping would change on those.
Yeah, I think toys would be the most difficult. Electronics too, there's all the testing involved because a lot of them will be returns. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll see.
Yeah.
I have access to all these things. I just haven't bit the bullet yet. I haven't been brave enough to try like something new.
Maybe just start out small and work your way up, just like you did with clothes.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True. I don't know. I'm kind of like, I have the too much gene, right? Like I always go as big as possible. So I think for me, if I was going to like experiment with one of these things, I would get like a full pallet of it and then I'd be
Oh my
stuck with a full
goodness.
pallet of stuff to figure out what to do with it.
So let me ask you a question. I know you don't like watch a lot of people and get advice from people, but having come where you come from, what advice would you give somebody who's starting out, no matter what their situation, whether they're a single mom, whether you're married and have kids and you don't have a lot of time, what advice would you give somebody starting out in reselling?
It's okay to start with what you have access to. Like you can clear out your own closet, clear out your kid's closet, and that's your first inventory, and then you don't have to put any money into it. It's
Yeah.
okay to snowball and just let it take its time. Like you're not, anyone just starting out isn't going to be able to like start themselves off with a warehouse and a pallet of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have to start small and start somewhere with what we have access to.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And I think there's too many people starting out. They want to just jump into the pallets right away. And that's just,
Yeah, I have people message me in my wholesale and they say, hey, I've been reselling for a month. I would like a pallet. And I tell them, I don't think that'll work for you. Like, have you ever seen 500 items in a room before? How many items do you have listed? Like 500 items is more than you currently have listed, you know?
that is, may I say that's awesome that you're doing that for them because they don't know at the time when you're sharing that they may be frustrated with you saying no, but you are blessing them hugely by saying no because it is true that would be so overwhelming for them, the financial aspect of it, trying to figure out what to do with that. I have so much respect for the fact that you know that that may not be a wise thing for them and you're actually protecting them by saying no. They may not see it now, but you're actually protecting them in my opinion.
I feel bad, but I never want anyone to feel like they got the short end of the deal with me, right? I want my customers to do well and I want them to be happy to come back and have more because they did so well the first time. Like I never want them to be stressed out because they got a pallet off me.
Right?
You know, the pallets are the happy place. I want them to be their happy place too.
Yeah. Wow. So what is your goal in for the future here? I mean, you're already selling a lot in each show. What is your goal even just this next year?
Um, I don't know. I think I already like hit and surpassed my goal for the year just in January. So we'll see what happens. Um,
I saw
I
your
think
numbers on Instagram. Wow.
it
That is
was a month.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot. I think the next goal is to get an employee, like someone to help me with packing orders or just staging stuff while I run shows. Um, as far as wholesale, I don't know. I think I would like to sell 50 pallets a week in wholesale. That's 50 pallets out to other people. That's a ton of inventory, but I think I can do that. Um, shows are probably going to be at this point more supplemental instead of being my main thing. I think I'm going to maybe turn shows down a little bit and try to focus more on supplying.
I was gonna say since you have access to such big quantity, it would get to the point, especially if you want to spend more time with your daughter and actually having a life and not being exhausted all the time, being able to still make a good amount of money, blessing other people, but not having to work quite so hard. That's a really good route for you.
Shows are time and effort. Wholesaling is money and organization. Like they're different skills, different things that you need for each one, and they require different things of you. I think wholesaling takes less time for me. It's just you need a lot more money to invest up front, and you have to be like very strictly organized with how
Yeah,
you're
and a
doing.
lot of money.
Yeah, yeah,
When you shared how much those were, I was like, oh my gosh. Do you
yeah,
ever like when you make those purchases, do you ever like, okay, breathe, breathe.
yeah. When you send the wire, there's always that moment right before you click the button of I could just not,
Yeah.
I could save this money and I could like pay off my house or something like that.
Now, is that a goal for you to own your house?
Um, I want to sell the one I have and move into a different one. And I think for the next one, I would like to pay for it fully in cash.
Nice. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have so much respect for that. My husband and I actually own our current house. We had a business that we owned. We moved from Washington out here almost 3 years ago. We owned a 10-acre horse farm. We were empty nesters of 6 kids. And we sold our 10-acre horse farm and our business and paid cash for the house we currently live in. We have no debt whatsoever
I think that's the dream.
and plan to stay that way for the rest of our lives. We're actually in the process of going into some real estate investing, and everything we'll be doing is going to be paying cash for everything.
That's great.
Yeah.
Look at you. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to continue to resell. I do have a goal eventually of just, we're planning to move closer to our kids down the line because we have grandkids and,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, it's hard. It's so
Yeah.
hard. When we moved out here from Washington, we have two kids who live out here now, but I did not realize how hard it would be to be away from my kids. And I'm away from four of my kids right now. And my daughter who lives local here, she's eventually going to be moving to Arkansas with her husband and their kids. But our son who lives here now, he'll probably move back towards the area with us. And I have two other grandkids back there and other kids who are married or going to be getting married in the future. And I told my husband, there's no way I can be that far away from my daughters and my grandkids and not be able to hug them and love on them and spend time with them. It's killing me.
Yeah.
So we are planning to move closer. And my goal is to maybe still do reselling. But man, I want to spend time with family.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
That's like
being debt free has been the
like you
best
could do it
decision we ever
anytime.
made. What's that?
That's the good thing about reselling too. You can do it anytime, anywhere.
Exactly, exactly. And we're almost in our, well, he's in his mid 50s. I'm turning 54 in a few months, and we want to have some sort of retirement and not have to work really hard. So that's why the investing, and we used to do house flipping and all kinds of things. We've always been entrepreneurial. So I think it's amazing that you want to pay cash for your next house. That's such an incredible goal. And
Yeah, be debt free. I would like to do all the things you're doing.
yeah, well, I'm telling you, where you've come from and where you are now, may I say, you should be so incredibly proud of what you have accomplished, girl.
Thank
So
you.
proud. And just the hard work ethic you've put into it, the willingness to grow and learn and change and make mistakes and keep growing. You are inspiring, and so many could learn from your example. So
Thank
many. It's just very humbling. And
you.
I say that with so much respect. I hope I'm not making you uncomfortable. I hope I'm not.
No, no.
Okay, okay. I am so glad we did this. It's just, yeah. I'm so glad we did this. I
Me
am,
too. I'm glad we got the everything to work, the Zoom and the Google Meet. I'm glad we got them to work.
well, I was actually thinking about just like waiting another day, but I thought, well, I was on here on Google and I'm like, I got to figure out how this works because this might work for somebody else. I'm glad you made that second link so you could just connect with me because I still don't know how to send the link out. I don't think you got it.
It might be
Um,
easier on the phone than on the computer. I'm not sure.
It might be, but I'm so glad we connected and did this. And wow. So you don't know like the next year where you're going to be, next 5 years. I mean, do you plan to like, this is like your living now? Is reselling and wholesaling?
Yeah, until I retire. I would like to retire within the next 5 to 10 years. So
I
it'll
was
be
going to say.
reselling. Yeah.
So once you're done reselling, are you just going to like build up a huge nest egg and then retire doing that? Or do you plan to still be an entrepreneur doing something else?
I think I'm not the kind of person who could do nothing. So I think I'll always dabble in something. I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. I do like reselling. Like maybe I'll just go back to not doing pallets anymore because it takes so much time. But maybe I would just like scavenge Nordstrom and TJ Maxx sales and still list that stuff a little bit and have a lot of time to do other things too. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Well, I will say, just listening to how you run your business, I've been trying to just like scale back of not that it's noise, but just everybody else and what they're doing and not get caught up in what they're doing. Finding what works for me and just sticking to it and hearing you talk about how you're just focused. You now know what works for you and you're just focused and you're not worrying about what other people are doing. You're just doing what works for you and just continuing on. And that's kind of where I am at now. And hearing you say that has encouraged me to, now that my husband and I know what works for me, staying focused, not worrying about what everybody else is doing, and just charging the hill with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for encouraging me in that because I've needed that push. My husband's like, you now know that men's works for you. You know that jewelry works for you. Just go.
Mhm.
So hearing
Yeah.
that you just cut out everybody else and you just focus has definitely encouraged me to really just stay focused, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, other people's businesses don't affect mine, right? So only I know what works for me. And what works for me might not work for someone else, vice versa. You know, all I can do and all I can control is my business and what I do. And so that's all I'm going to focus on.
Yeah. So what do you do in your free time?
Oh, I cook. I really like cooking. I like taking my kid. There's a nice creek behind our house. So we'll go to the creek and we'll just like hang out.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
nice.
that.
I need to take her to the zoo soon because it's starting to get like a tiny bit warmer. I would love to take her to the zoo. But yeah,
So cooking or baking or both?
I can't bake to save my life, only
Ah!
cooking. Baking turns out bad. Cooking is okay. It's edible.
Now, are you hoping to eventually be married and have more family, or are you planning on just being you and your daughter?
No, I have a boyfriend.
Okay.
He's nice. He hasn't been around for long, but I'm happy. Yeah,
I'm so happy for you.
thank you.
Wow, you've just made things happen for yourself. Is he a reseller?
No, he wants to join me though. He wants to be my first employee. So we'll see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, Anya, I'm so excited for you. That
thank
is
you.
that is amazing. You worked so hard to be where you are and to be happy in a relationship, and your daughter happy, and man, you come so far. It's just amazing, your
Thank you.
story. And thank you so much for sharing it. I know some of this was very raw, and not everybody knows everything, every detail about how you got started. Thank you for being so open and for sharing and being so real with us. Um, Again, you very much humbled me and encouraged me too, so much. And I'm sure you will with other people that watch this video. Tell us where we can find you on social media.
So I'm on Whatnot. I do shows pretty much every single weekday from 10 till 2 Eastern. My name is Anea_F. I'm on Instagram. Pretty much all I do on Instagram is just post when I have pallets available so people can buy them off me. It's my first and last name, Anea Fisher. It is private just because that's what makes the pallet gods happy and all the people I source from happy. But you can request to follow me and I'll accept. Other than that, I'm not really on social media. I don't do YouTube, TikTok, anything like that. I just keep it simple.
Yeah. I was doing different types of videos on YouTube, but this last year I've really just simplified it. I do sell videos, and I'm now doing these interviews, and I'm just keeping it simple there too. Because I do want to share stories like yourself with other people so they can be encouraged. And I'm really enjoying hearing people's stories in these interviews. Your story is so beautiful.
Thank you. I
So
love watching
beautiful.
people's stories too. I think Daily Refinement did a few, and those were like the only videos of his I ever watched.
Yeah.
Just because it's interesting to hear from other people like the how I made it kind of thing, but for resellers.
Yeah. And this is why I'm enjoying doing these on my YouTube channel because, again, everybody has such a different story and overcoming and how things work for them. And I'm not interested so much in where they source from. I want to know how they started and what they overcame to get to where they are. That's the story.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
the story. Thank you so much, girl. This has been absolutely amazing. I have loved this. Staying connected. I would love to stay connected with you and see how you're doing in the future.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
oh my gosh, this was just amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
Okay,
so much for
guys.
having me.
Yes, thank you. I'm just, yeah, I'm excited.
Me too. It's going to
You're
be a good
seriously
year.
kicking butt, and your example and your humbleness in your shows, you're just so real. I know people love you. If you aren't following her yet, guys, you should go check out her shows. She runs amazing shows. And follow her on Instagram. Okay, that is probably just about it. Say hi to your beautiful daughter
I will. Thank
and give
you.
her a big hug from all of us, all the reseller world.
I will. I will. She's going to have blueberries for dinner tonight. It's her favorite.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. All right. I'm going to try and figure out how to shut this thing off.
Okay.
Thank you, and I have a great one.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful interview. Like I said, her story is amazing. It just really takes all the excuses away. I was so humbled by listening to her and just learning from her. It was just incredible. So, again, thank you so much, Ania, for doing this interview. I so appreciate you. I will be linking this down below for everybody to be able to post it and share it with her as well. And guys, again, we have another one coming up in 2 more weeks, already pre-recorded and ready to go. So stay tuned for that. If you want to see that, do feel free to subscribe, as well as other reseller content. And guys, we will see you next time. Be productive as always, and take care.